Earlier this year, Sirui officially joined the L-mount Alliance, and their first lens that they came out with was the Aurora full-frame 85mm f1.4 for L-mount. This is a pretty impressive lens that comes at a pretty reasonable price point, especially with all the features that you are able to get. Now, quick disclaimer, Sirui did send me out this lens to check out and review. However, they are not paying me, nor do they get to see this video before I upload. So these are going to be my honest and truthful thoughts and opinions about this lens, and especially coming from a videographer perspective. But without further ado, let's dive in. Start off with the price. This lens comes in brand new at $600. As I'm recording this, you can pick it up for $500, which is the exact same price brand new for the Lumix 85mm f1.8 lens, which I have used in the past. I don't own that lens, so I can give some thoughts and opinions later on about the autofocus and performance like that. But again, I can't show those two examples side by side because I don't have that lens on hand. It does come in this padded case with a lens hood. Now, I'll be honest, I probably don't see myself using this in the future, nor seeing the lens hood. I tend to throw away all my lens hoods after a certain amount of time, just because I really never use them. Diving into the physical build, this entire lens is a high quality durable made out of aluminum body. It does weigh about 1.2 pounds or 540 grams. It is about 4 inches tall or 102 millimeters, and it has a 67mm front filter thread, which is the exact same as all the other Lumix lenses. You do have an autofocus and manual switch, but this is where the extra cool features come in play. You do have a custom function button on the lens itself, so paired up with a Lumix camera, you can customize this button to do anything that you like. Then you also do have an aperture reading to control your aperture. The aperture is from f1.4 all the way to f16. Then on the other side, you do have a D-click, so you can turn this off and then make your aperture be a smooth pull. But when you turn it on, you're gonna have that clicking sound to click into the aperture. The last point on the physical build I do want to touch point on is going to be firmware updating. To firmware update, you do plug into a USB-C on the back of the lens right here. However, a quick disclaimer with that, it seems like you can only plug in and firmware with a Windows computer. So if you own a Mac or you don't have Windows computers, you're not going to be able to firmware update your lens unless you go to the public library or borrow a Windows computer from a friend. That's just something that I'm learning with some of these lenses that are not from Lumix, and if they require firmware update, you're going to have to use some type of Windows computer. If you don't own one, you're going to have to figure out that part out. Now let's talk about the autofocus for this lens. Overall, I would say this autofocus is pretty good, especially if you are using single point. It's really snappy. When you're using full area, it does take a little bit of a couple seconds to pick the subject, but once you have the subject locked on, it's pretty locked on, similar to how the Lumix autofocus lenses perform as well. It just takes a couple seconds longer when you're doing full area, and if you want the best performance of autofocus, I highly recommend using single area on a Lumix camera to get the best autofocus from this lens. In terms of minimum focus distance, this lens does have a minimum focus distance of 2.79 feet, or about 85 centimeters. And then in terms of focus breathing, I was very impressed by this because there wasn't a drastic shift when you're going from infinity to the minimum focus distance. Here's a couple shots of what flaring looks like on this lens. You can decide whether you like it or not, but overall, I think it looks pretty good. Lastly, I want to touch point on is going to be the image quality. Overall, I would have to say this produces a really natural, soft image overall. It's extremely pleasing to the eye. This is probably going to be my go-to lens for my second camera angle to have that tighter shot. So here's kind of my overall thoughts about this lens. Overall, I'm not a big, tight focal length type of guy. I like being wide. I like having quirky shots like that. So it's not going to be my go-to lens except for really interview setups and scenes. With that said though, I was very impressed by the autofocus performance out of this lens. The fact that it was pretty sticky when it got the subject meant that I felt like it was very reliable if I'm in an interview setup like that. Granted, the only thing that I am not a fan of currently right now is how you have to firmware update this lens, and you only can really use a Windows computer to do so. So as someone who only has Apple products in their entire household in terms of computers, well, using a USB-C to firmware update is really not ideal if you need a Windows computer. Granted, for the same price, you aren't going to be getting those extra features from even Lumix lenses, like the aperture reading, having a D-click, button, having the custom function button on this lens. So you get kind of a bunch of extra bells and whistles with this lens in comparison to other focal lengths for the L mount in this range. Aren't going to be having this many features without that extra price tag. So if you're interested in picking up the Aurora 85 f1.4, there will be a link in the description that does support my channel. If you guys have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. But if you do want to see a budget option for this focal length, well, I just made a video on the 75mm TT Artisan lens. That's right here. YouTube recommends you might like this video right here. Until next one, guys, peace.